I want to say morning, but it's afternoon. So good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Karen Rivas. My picture is on the right. I'm a very proud principal at the Carlos Rosario School, and I'm thrilled to have my colleague Lionel join me. For a little background on me, I started as an ESL teacher in 2005, and I've stayed in that space over time in the district. And I've had many experiences, but none like the last 2 years. And so we're grateful for the space to share how we found success in focusing on our most valuable assets, which are our people. I'll hand it to my amazing colleague, Lionel, to share a little bit about him.
Thank you, Karen. I'm Lionel McGee. I am the Director of Learning and Evaluation here at Carlos Rosario. I handle much of the data, reporting, assessment, performance measures, and accountability here at Carlos Rosario. My background up until 6 months ago was in higher education. I've spent almost all of my life in higher education, and I'm enjoying and learning a lot here in adult education in DC. So thank you.
Thank you. So our next slide gives you context about our school. So I've got a couple of screenshots, which I hope help to really bring life to some of these words. So we are in the District of Columbia. We are an adult public charter school. So thank you, Ebony, for putting our website in the chat. We've got pictures of both of our buildings, which are in wards 1 and 5, and we're open to any adult who hits the threshold for adult basic education who resides in the district. And so that's defined by needing to complete high school or learn English or get training to gain a job. In previous times, you can see that on the first bullet on the left that we were serving around 2,100 students annually. Students studied in one of these two beautiful buildings that you see. The majority of our students are in our English as a second language program. We also offer 2 ways for students to complete their high school credential with us by preparing for the GED exam in English or in Spanish. We have always offered digital literacy classes, and we have really expanded those. And we offer career training in high growth industries in the district. And so for us, that is in IT, that is in culinary arts, nurse aid training, and we also have a program for future teachers. It's a bilingual teacher's assistant program. And so the picture above is just a screenshot of our website banner to give you more context. On the left, you see some smiling faces over Zoom. That's what classes are largely looking like these days. In the middle, though, those are pictures of our students in action in the building. And on the far right is our most recent in-person graduation that we had. And so, we'll make sure you all can stay in touch with us after this presentation because we know we'll be having in the future an in-person graduation soon. So for a little more context on what it's looked like since March of 2020, we were in distance learning in an emergency mode at the end of last school year. And for us, the school year is 10 months, starting in late August and ending in June. So for the fall 2020 semester, we were fully distanced. That meant that every student was learning from home. We did not have students coming into the building to do more than maybe get some tech support or take a test. For our spring semester, the spring 2021 semester, we are in a small hybrid situation for our culinary arts classes and our nursing training classes where there's a mandatory hands-on component. We, as a public charter school, have a lot of autonomy, and we also, as part of that autonomy, we have strong oversight and accountability to what's called the DC Public Charter School Board. And so the DC Public Charter School Board, as well as the DC Office of the State Superintendent of Education, they set guidelines for all public schools to adhere to in the district. Of course, those vary in the non-compulsory education space, which is what we are in. Most of our students are ages 25 to 40. And of course, we can serve anyone who is age 16 and up by the DC code. So you can imagine life for a 40-year-old is not the same as for a 14-year-old. And so the guidelines set forward by the city are varied. And so on the right, we included what our vision is for planning for next school year. We've been through a lot starting in March of 2020 in emergency mode where everyone goes home, learns from home, got into the spring 2021 where we have a small hybrid, and we've learned a lot. And so as we look ahead, we want to make sure that our planning exemplifies our values to realize the best possible model for our entire community. So that's students, and that's in staff, and that's future students. Presently, we have 1,700 students enrolled. We have around 200 employees, and we actually have over 1,100 names on our interest list to be future students with us. And so we realize all of this through really holding up integrity, respect, perseverance, compassion, inclusivity, and collaboration. And so I hope those shine through on the coming slides as we share with you how it is that we're taking a human-centered approach thinking about next year. So our next slide, if we can advance, gives a little more detail here. So you've got these arrows, and actually instead of pointing to the right, they could really point down to be a flow, because for planning, we have to start at the beginning, and that looks like health and safety. There are health and safety guidelines that are told to us externally. I think that Jeff had mentioned it about shifting requirements for things like masks. And so as a public school in the district, we adhere to DC guidance. And then we take a look at those and decide, does that work for our community? And so one example of that is DC schools are allowed to have students at 3 feet social distance, but we are maintaining 6 right now because our community, we know, has been very vulnerable to COVID. And so we make sure we, of course, adhere to the minimum for a district public school, and we employ our best practice. And so for us, that's looked like going above and beyond. We also are in a space where we are learning what is allowable for the district's adult schools. Compulsory age education in the district was informed, I think last week or the week prior, that it's mandatory full-time in-person learning for school year 2020, 21, 22, save for children who have a medical note. And that is not the case for adult schools. At present, the adult schools are working together to share what it is our community is saying, so we can align on what we feel is best for adult learners. So we are in a transition time, and we don't fully have that clear yet, but it is absolutely what would come right after health and safety. The third thing that you're going to hear a lot of my colleague Lionel speak about is student need. That is the next most important thing for us to focus on. And so we will share our process for how we are measuring that. And additionally, you heard me mention that we have a small hybrid right now. Certain programs simply must occur in person. For culinary arts, our students need to be cooking in an industry kitchen. For nurse aid training, our students need to demonstrate skills in person, and they also go into a hospital setting for their practicum. And there are various assessments that are not allowed to be done remotely. And so we have learned a lot in that space, and we have non-negotiables there. For example, I mentioned our bilingual teaching assistant program is one of our career training programs. The Praxis oversees that certification, and it is required that students take that in person. And of course, everything we do must be feasible, and feasible is determined not just by hard numbers, but more softer inputs like focus groups and feedback. And so our process to gather need and feasibility has taken the shape of surveys. And so at this point, I want to hand it to my colleague, Lionel Miggy, who is going to share what process we have engaged with. And I also want to thank Ebony, who has dropped in a PDF of our survey that we used with our students.
Thank you, Karen. So to understand our adult students' mindset and their needs in terms of returning to school in fall 2021, we put together a survey, and some of those things that we wanted to gather from this, some of the important things from our students were their needs in terms of going to school in person, returning to school in a hybrid manner, returning to school online. We wanted to understand what concerns they had about safety, childcare, their adult students, what concern they had about being able to work and go to school, considering what they have been through in the prior year. To do this, we solicited input from teachers and administrators. We put together a survey. We are an adult, really international charter school. We have a large number of international students, a large number of students who speak Amharic, a large number of students who speak Spanish, a large number of students who speak French. So in putting together the survey, we took this into account. And of course, our students, we have a large number of students who are English as second language. We put together the survey so that it was one survey. And when the students would receive the survey, they could select one of 4 languages they could take the survey in just by clicking on a button. And again, those choices was English, Amharic, Spanish, and French. To make the survey very simple, of course, we use branching and skipping so that they only went to the relevant questions, the questions that pertain to their previous responses. We limited the number of open-ended questions, and I would say going forward, we would even consider to limit those questions even further. It's a tough thing to do for individuals to enter in and write out a response to a question. And when we consider some of our students, like for example, our students who are Amharic speaking, many of them will not even have a typewriter to be able to respond in Amharic. The other thing we did with the survey is we made a simple process of collecting the IDs from the students so that we can go back and further disaggregate the data if we choose to do so in terms of what campus they reside at, what program they're in, what class they were in the past semesters, etc. And I'm just going to walk you through a couple examples of the type of questions, a few questions that we had on the survey. And the first one you see there in front of you, do you plan to study at Carlos Rosario next semester? This question would branch out if the answer was no. It would take you to another question. I'm going to go on to the second question. The third question, I would say here, what will make it difficult? What may make it difficult for you to take classes in the fall of 2021? So we not only know whether you were intended on coming back or not coming back, we also wanted to know whether the schedule is going to have an effect on you, safety concerns, their work schedule. And then we also had a small write in there where they could fit in things if it weren't one of those 3 top things there on the list. We go into the next slide. We asked the students what schedule is best for them in terms of hybrid, in-person, or being 100% virtual. Students have gotten quite used to, many students have gotten quite used to coming to school only in a virtual manner. It afforded them the ability to be with their kids, to work with their kids, to take care of their kids while they were home. So we took into account that there are going to be those issues of daycare, the kids having time off from school, etc. So there were other questions in the survey, and you may take a look at those questions and any of those, if you have questions about any of the questions that were put in there, why we put them in there, please get back in touch with me. If the class you would take is 100% person only, then you would definitely attend class in person, will not attend. So we wanted to understand the effect of the way of our planning of what we have to offer in the upcoming semester. We want to make sure we're offering what students want and in the best manner we can under the circumstances, under the restrictions that we have, whether they're placed on us by outside agencies or internally. Next slide. Back to you, Carrie.
Thank you, Lionel. So as you can see, there was and a couple folks noted in the chat, there was a lot of interest for staying online. And so we thanked ourselves when we wrote that question in that followed it. If we're not online, would you come in? Because as I mentioned earlier, it's not fully known to us as a DC Public Charter School Board, what is DC Public Charter School, what is allowable by the Office of the State Superintendent and then our charter authorizer, the charter board. And so we are working with them to confirm what's allowable. And so what that practically looks like is, I was at a meeting yesterday with different leads or points of contact. Lionel and I were meeting with the 8 other peer adult schools to share what is our community saying and what is it that we think we want to do next. And then Monday, leaders from our schools are meeting with the them the heads of at OSSE, the Office of State Superintendent of Education, and the District Public Charter School Board as well, to say, this is what we need to succeed. Also, there were many other data points that came out of the survey, but we just wanted to lift up that our process to keep a human-centered approach is to ask about, what could be hard for you to study. And I think many of us as adult educators would not be surprised that students' variables of their schedule, that's a big factor. It's not going to go away. I think any of us accept that reality. It's only just gotten so much bigger. Health and safety is still a very high concern. We see that things are shifting around our community being able to access the vaccine. And so I put on the picture on the right side of the screen some of our students in class, and then some of our students in our parking lot. They're able to come and pick up free food weekly. We are also very proud to be a COVID vaccine site next week. That's something that we've been working on since before vaccines were a thing. And so health and safety will continue to be a number one area of focus for us. As also, we want to preserve the innovation that we gained at this time. We saw a lot of the students saying we do want to maintain virtual learning. We also heard a lot about that from our faculty too. And so as we move forward, some things that we wanted to make sure stay present to be successful are, we have to increase capacity for administering tests. We had a very low rate of students taking formal assessments at distance compared to what occurred in person. We were only able to gather around 400 matching pre-post tests over the course of a year, whereas in the past we would have had about 4 times that amount of matching pre-post tests. We did set up a system to measure digital literacy progress, and we saw major gains there. And one critical component to that is access to devices. And we are very fortunate as a public charter school to have stable resources, but they weren't enough. So we certainly had to pull into grant funds and other fundraising to be able to provide one-to-one. All of our students are provided a device by the school, and most of them are internet enabled. And so as we look to the future, that's some innovation and access that we want to keep. It comes at a huge cost, and so we are thinking about what that would look like. We've also learned that to succeed, we have to distribute the planning as much as possible to the teams that can do this work. After we're clear on what our external mandates are and what our internal strategy is, we have to give the works to the team so they can realize their expertise best. And so what that looks like is our assessment team is crafting plans to how they can bring students into the building to take tests. And our registration team is doing something similar where they have remote office hours and used things like Calendly to help students make appointments with them to re-enroll. We've also really found that numerous touch points in sharing plans have to be present for us to succeed. It is still a time of hyper change. And so we're finding we need to continuously use channels of things like bulletins that employees come to expect, ask for team leads to put it on their departmental agendas, and then create several face-to-face moments to have connections. And so we meet with student government regularly. We try to have open office hours, and we find that we simply cannot do enough of that. Another big takeaway that has to stay is front and center is student services is critical to our student success. It came out in our survey that many of our students are facing uncertainty with jobs. We had over 70% of our students who worked in the hospitality industry in the last year report job loss. We have many barriers for our students to accessing things like unemployment. And so student services are absolutely critical for our students to stay engaged. They always have been, but even more so now. Another big takeaway from some of our focus groups with faculty is that we need to stay steady where we can and be as simple as possible. We have adopted the learning management system of Schoology school-wide and a messaging platform of Remind. And we have shifted to online tools that align with the college and career readiness standards because that is what we focus on. And it is also, we bought things that were off the shelf to be able to use at distance. And as we transition to next year, we're hearing from our teachers and students, they want to stay with these tools. And I mentioned it at the top when I talked about access to resources, and I'll go ahead and mention it again. Grants and community partners are how we are meeting this moment. In addition to creating flexible enrollment options as much as possible. Many of our students stop out. They don't drop out. They stop and they return. And so we have adopted more flexibility with our leave of absence process. We have created extended windows and hours for our students to be able to rejoin as much as possible. We want to keep our virtual doors open, and we are also very thrilled to be able to keep our physical doors open as we look to the future.